Welcome to the July 7th edition of the PFF Forecast. This is an awesome episode. We have Nate Tice from The Athletic and the Athletic Football Podcast on the show today. It was such a good episode, such a good conversation. We're considering splitting it into two. I actually, at this point, haven't decided whether we're going to do that or not. I can just promise you this. This conversation is one you do not want to miss. It has everything from ranking offensive play callers and what scheme looks like in the NFL right now, and where it's going, all the way through tiering out the NFL quarterbacks. We do 4 tiers of NFL quarterbacks. We then get into what bets Nate has placed because he's a bettor. That's why we have him on the show. And we even get all the way into story time about Nate and his dad, Mike Tice, obviously the former Vikings head coach. There's a Russell Wilson story and a recommendation. It's in some combination somewhere over the next 2 podcasts, but it's awesome. I promise you that. Let's rock. All right, this is a long podcast, so Eric had to run, and so I'm doing the intro. And the intro is really simple. We have Nate Tice on the podcast. It's fucking awesome. I hope you enjoy it. Let's get to it. Nate Tice, son of Mike Tice. That's correct. You guessed correctly. Is son of Mike Tice. He was also the backup, played with Russell Wilson in Wisconsin. We talk about all that stuff. Here he is. Welcome in to a very, very special, a long time coming guest, Nate Tice, who, if you don't know, if you do not follow Nate on Twitter, you need to, Nate_Tice. He is of The Athletic and the Athletic Football Show, which is a fantastic show. In fact, we do a segment, Nate, at the end of our shows where we recommend something. I'm going to have you recommend something here at the end of the show, but okay. I recommended your show, specifically the episode that you did with Deontay Lee on defensive schemes and where they're heading. And it was fantastic. And honestly, it made me ask all these questions about offense, listening to it. So I'm excited to have you on today so that we can talk offense, given that background that I have now.
Okay, great. I'm fired up. No, I know when Deontay came off for the defensive one, it was great because, like, as Robert said afterwards, he was just like, I was playing point guard with you two because, like, Deontay, and sometimes it was just like we were just bouncing, like, just hearing the defensive side of the ball, even for me, is sometimes good because all I care about is points and offensive play and all that. And so sometimes it's good for me to, like, hear the defensive side and go like, oh, well, the counter to that is actually made me sweat a little bit sometimes because sometimes you're actually talking to somebody that knows their shit, or I don't know if I can swear right now, but if he knows their stuff, yeah, okay, I thought so. But if he knows their stuff, it's like, got up your game as well. So, but those were so much fun to do, especially with Deontay, and just also just like generally looking at what good teams are doing. And sometimes that's what every other team does. It's a copycat league. So sometimes if you just look at what the best teams are doing, and then you can maybe get a preview of what you're about to see this next year or the next 2 years. Mm-hmm. And then it's so funny because then after this year, say it was a great offensive play or concepts that's been running, then the defense counters that, and then we're right back to square one next year. Yep. And then we just do the whole process all over again. So it was a fun show to do.
That was a point I made the other day, and we'll talk about quarterbacks, but that was a point I was making about a team like Tennessee where they had 2 years of having a great offensive mind run the show. You have, and in 2019 they were amazing. They were even better efficiency-wise than they were in 2020. You have like the double whammy of the league trying to catch up to that system and then losing the play caller. Like, those are interesting things to talk about because of exactly what you said, whereas, there's a copycat aspect to it, but there's also a fact of, like, if you don't evolve with it, you're Chip Kelly relatively quickly. And that's like a really interesting sort of way to put it. And sort of like, if you are the hot coach with the hot scheme, like what ends up happening 1 year to the next.
I mean, how many times have we seen that? Chip Kelly's a great example. The one that it's so funny how NFL minds are, just people in general. They go, oh, no one's going to copy that. That's not going to work. And then it works. And then everyone copies it real quick. Yep. And then, but that's the thing, is they have to stay innovative. That's Sean Payton is probably the number one example for me, is that he was a wonderkind. Like, he was an offensive guru, like quarterback whisperer. That was his thing. Came in the Saints offense, even though they run quote unquote staple concepts, they've kind of tweaked how he's run it over the years. Him and Andy Reid are probably the top two that you can really close your eyes and think of being innovative. Sometimes you have to look backwards, also in the sense of looking at college and high school ball, but also looking at what worked in the past. And it's kind of cool, like even defenses now, and I'm sure we'll touch on it, some of the fronts they're playing and seeing what types of runs are going to be more prevalent coming up. And we talked about on the podcast, and you might start seeing more counters and more pullers because of just what the defenses are doing now. And the defenses started doing that because of the outside zone everybody was running. And so it's just funny. It's just like, one step over. But it's just, that is just such a great point, is the guys have to stay relevant and stay tweaking and modifying. You just can't run the same stuff. We see a guy like Cliff Kingsbury who thinks he can just run his stuff. And then all of a sudden it goes, well, yeah, it works once, but then like, guess what? Defense, even though we make fun of them, NFL coaches are pretty good. But I make fun of them as much as anybody. It's the one thing is they do study film. They're going to catch up to what you're running. If they have enough players to do it, they're going to catch you. So it's just, you just got to keep tweaking, stay ahead of the game.
You Nate have come to the right podcast, because this is, look, I wanted to be pro Cliff Kingsbury. I got mad at people. I thought they were just jealous because he's a good looking dude who had a hot girlfriend who got a head coaching job. And I was like, lay the fuck off. Okay. But I'm liable to turn around. Okay. And this has been a disaster, is probably too harsh of a term given how relatively successful they've been.
Yeah.
But if it does not improve, it will be kind of a disaster, because they have a wealth of talent. We'll talk about Kyler Murray here with the quarterbacks. Obviously, the DeAndre Hopkins, like, just theft in the middle of the night from Bill O'Brien. They've had high draft picks that they've spent on offensive and defensive players. So, like, it's a great point. You're either looking around the corner, a la a Kyle Shanahan, or you're going to look very old very quickly, because you're right. Like, the best way to prepare is to do and to think about what teams are going to do is to say, okay, what film are they watching?
Yes.
And then bring someone in that knows how they might adjust from a defensive standpoint and be like, okay, what do you think they're going to do?
Or I think you need, which this is why I think some guys have staying power, some guys pop up every month, or you have to be like Greg Roman and end up with like otherworldly talent every once in a while, right? Because you remember in the 2012 playoffs when Colin Kaepernick rushed for like 180 yards, Eric Walden was honestly bent on every single goddamn fake, and it was like everybody's like, oh, this is how the NFL is going to be, right? And even like Vince Young's rookie year was sort of the same thing, and ultimately everybody caught up, but then Roman kind of rolls into a guy who's been better than any of those guys before. And even we've seen, again, 2019 was otherworldly efficiency. 2020 wasn't necessarily quite as good. And again, that's the point. You can't always depend upon your players being you have to be good, not only in changing your scheme to the league averages, but also changing your scheme to your players, right, Nate? I mean, that's a huge aspect of it.
Using role with Greg Roman there, it's just it's really unfair.
The number one with it is seeing Kyle Shanahan going with Washington with RG3, then the Browns with Hoyer, and then he gets to Matt Ryan, and finally gets a talented quarterback. And also some of the stuff he did even with Matt was oh wow, I didn't know that Kyle did the straight drop back stuff. Not everything's play action and boot, that's what I knew it as, but then that's because he had a quarterback that could actually do it. That could actually drop back 15, 20 times and make the right read and progress and do all the quarterback-y things. And then now getting into San Fran, and then you see this weird hybrid offense that he's been kind of tweaking with this past year. And it's kind of almost wishbone-y, guys off the ball, but they're in the gun, a lot of jet sweeps and lead blockers with the jet sweeps. And that's what we talked about in the offensive podcast, using motion in different ways. Yeah. And that's where Greg Roman, we were going to tie it in with him. That's such a great example with Greg Roman. Greg Roman almost has a ceiling as a play caller. He does. His passing game's not going to be great, but his boot game's going to be awesome. His run game's going to be really fun. The thing is, you need certain personnel to run that. And now he's got Lamar. Okay, cool. We're good there. But if he just went to coach, I don't know, Justin Herbert, you'd be kind of a little scary like that. A Kyle Shanahan of the world can go, you drop him in anybody, he's going to at least get a tolerable offense. At least
you can give him Mac Jones.
Yeah.
That sounds good. The highest praise
That
you
was,
can give Kyle
yes.
Shanahan is that the only coach in the entire universe who would trade up to 3 and people go, you know what? He's after Mac Jones because he'll do great things with Mac Jones is Kyle Shanahan.
I know. And no one was like, I mean, that entire time I was like, I refuse to be gaslit by this. I was like, I refuse.
Welcome to the best podcast on the planet.
I just said it the whole month. I was like, I refuse. I just refuse to believe it because he would not do that. No one would trade up for that, for Chad Pennington, the millennial Chad Pennington, like that. But then I mean, I actually, Mac Jones.
That's a great comp. That's like a compliment.
And that's the thing. It's somehow it's a backhanded compliment. It's like because if you know Chad Pennington, you know his limitations, but you know he was freaking awesome at a couple things. Like he was.
It's a compliment at 15, and a negative at 3. That was the whole argument.
That was
2-time comeback player of the year, by the way.
Yeah, yes, he was. Yeah,
I want
had one MVP year with that Dolphins year was really funny.
Right.
Like also, if you go back and look at it, it's always like, oh yeah, Chad Pennington had that 1 year before Cleo Lemon came down in there. But but with all the that's a great point. But with like the Mac Jones of the world, like that, he can get something out of it and you can close your eyes and picture it. Some of these coaches, you just go, man, I don't know what they would run if they had X at quarterback, if they had Z at quarterback. Like that doesn't make sense. Greg Roman getting Lamar makes all sense in the world. Now, but that's gonna be what's so much fun seeing like an Arthur Smith with Matt Ryan. And it was funny. I was excited to see Julio Jones in that offense, but now he's going to Tennessee. So it's kind of a weird thing there. But that was in Tennessee. And that point that Eric was making, a second ago was that watching, like every team watches like a good offense. So I think what the Titans have done the last couple of years under Arthur Smith is they really kind of saw what the Rams were doing, running a lot of the same passes and same run scheme or running the play action to boot off of very similar formations. They have the motions going with it, the zone slice stuff, and just tying everything in. I just think they did it out of 12 and 21 personnel as the Rams did out of 11, but same kind of concept and kind of like line of thinking. And I just think more and more teams will do that where they play with tempo. They give you the similar looks. They run those efficient kind of plays and they, outside zone, boot, play action off of it, two big overs and posts with a little check down underneath. I mean, Derrick Henry can barely catch the ball. You would see Todd Gurley how many times catch a check down, just barrel down the sideline for 30 yards, even when his knees were going. Like Derrick Henry was doing the same thing, even though he can't catch it. Like he was still getting those big pops just because it was such a wide open opportunity underneath. But I think a lot of teams might look at that and go, that's not so bad. And maybe just tying everything in together.
Well, one of the questions that's a great point. I wonder if you look at those two offenses, do you see a 1-year lag? Because last season with LA, what you saw was short A dots, right? And you saw like the jet sweep motion stuff to Robert Woods and stuff that you really didn't see with Tennessee. But I agree, like those offenses, you kind of saw the explosiveness, the big chunks. The one question I have now for Tennessee, and again, this is sort of why I'm not as high on Tannehill moving forward, is anytime, and we've seen this all over the place, you have a great coordinator and he moves on and the next guy says, look, nothing's changing. I'm going to be that guy. And you've been around coaching your like whole life and you know this, like sometimes these guys just have it, right? And other guys don't have it. And you'd be better off if a guy like Downing was to say, I'm just going to run my own offense and the one that I have great intuition with, because honestly, when you said tempo, I'm thinking to myself, God, this guy's trying to speak somebody else's language faster than the average coordinator. I feel like it might be a disaster if they try to completely replicate it, much like what we saw in Atlanta, where Steve Sarkisian's actually a good offensive coordinator. But in 2017, that offense stalled so badly because he's trying to be Shanahan when he's Sarkisian, who's, like a half a standard deviation below, but still more than good enough to call plays for an offense like Atlanta.
That's such a good point you brought up too, with even the tempo stuff. Like, saying it, okay, we're all the same people, but it's truly not my words, it's not my terms. And especially on game day when that stuff, it's a 40-second play clock, but really it's 8 to 12 seconds that you're getting that play call in. And if you're doing it a half second slower just every time, or a half second where you're like, man, what would Arthur have run? What do I have run? That's such a good point, because I've been around Downing when we were in Oakland together. And that's kind of some of the same stuff, I would say issues, but same situation that he got in with there, where he tried to use the same terms that Musgrave was using and kind of use it in his own way. And at most of the part, I'd say 85% of it, good, fine, everyone gets it. But there is that little, like you said, half standard deviation below. And that's such a good point. It's just hard. It's for any human being. I mean, I think it's just hard for anyone to do it. How many times, you see all these guys come in going through the Saban tree, It's not like everyone comes out, or the Belichick tree, and they try to go somewhere else and they try to run the exact same stuff Belichick ran, but it's like, it's not really your defense. Like you adapted to it and learned it, but it's like, it's not really yours. You could know every aspect of it, but sometimes, like you said, sometimes some of these coordinators are just feeling it. Like they're just, I mean, you guys played Madden. Sometimes you just are like, I can't call a bad play right now.
Yeah.
That is literally how it works in real football. Sometimes you're like, I'm going to call this again. Ooh, wait till I run this play action on next series. Yeah. Boom. Same exact stuff for play callers.
Well, I just remember when I played, like we had a very good coordinator one year, got a head coach job at a different college. And I just remember in practice, I'm like, okay, that's not how the backside of that play works. Like, and it's just like, but I get like why he screwed it up, because it wasn't his play. Like he didn't sleep with this. Like he doesn't have this in his head. And it's like, again, these guys are the best at what they're doing, but it's just those little, and you said 80% of plays in the NFL are just whatever. Everybody runs the same thing, but it's those 20% that sort of like are the difference between being Andy Reid and Sean Payton and being some guy, just some guy, right?
Another guy. You bring up, and so I told everyone at the top of the show, we were going to do quarterback tiers, and we are. But this has been such an interesting conversation, and you brought up, it's not just the plays you have in there, it's when you call them, how you implement them throughout the game, the feel for it. There's science and art, right? Like how well prepared you are allows you to then get in that flow state in the game and, just kill people the way that Kyle Shanahan does with like Nick Mullins at quarterback, right?
Yep.
And we actually had a good conversation, Eric and I, a few weeks back on, who we thought the best play callers, the best offensive, minds, I guess you could put a term on it. And I know this is not prepared, but I'm curious, Nate, if you were like, maybe not in a particular order unless you have one, but like your top 3 to 5, you're like, these guys, maybe they're on a different level, or how would you kind of segment out, rank the play callers in the NFL?
Yeah, I think overall, Sean Payton's my number one. As far as, and I'm cheating a little bit because I'm including game plan and all the tweaks he does. Yeah, but Sean Payton, I think Sean Payton rarely has those games where you're like, man, he sucked. Like he got fooled for an entire half. Man, it was like usually when they lost a game, it was one, their defense blew, or two, it was him kind of like, or a couple of mistakes happened, a fumble and a tip ball. Okay, got away from him. But never did I watch a game. And it's kind of like, I think there's a saying in horse racing that a jockey can't win you a race, but they can lose it.
Yeah.
Like, a little bit. It's kind of similar thinking. But I think with Sean Payton, it's like I never saw a game where I'd watch him and go like, they put a bad game plan together and bad play call. He has the best, I think, of feeling it when he run stuff, when to just sometimes just spam a play and just keep calling the same thing over and over and then run the tweak. So he's the usually I would put him at my number one. I think McVay and Andy Reid, of course, are up there. I think Andy, why I wouldn't put him at one is sometimes you get a little too cute. And not just play design, but also sometimes you can tell he really wants to call a play, like even if it might not be the best time for it, but he really wants to call it.
Fullback dive to Anthony Sherman.
Yeah, stuff like, or the throwback to Mahomes on 4th and 1. Like, he just can't help. He can't help himself, and that's what makes Andy Reid though. Like you can't knock him too much because that's also he has the balls to do it. So you can't really knock him too much. I think McVay, he is kind of this past year made me appreciate him a little more just because of how Goff was playing and the lack of explosiveness. But as far as just kind of flow and putting it all together, I'm just trying to think else. And of course, Kyle Shanahan's up there too. There's a couple guys that could just start feeling it. Like it's fun to watch an offensive coordinator really like put a game plan together, really offensive staff, I should say, because sometimes the line coach has more say. Of course, I'm going to say that, but more say than people realize. But all those guys, the McVay, Stefanski can feel it sometimes. Some of his drop back stuff isn't my favorite, but he can really he's willing to dial up 2 plays in a row that are saying go bootleg to bootleg. That's always really fun. I know I'm just I could just keep listing off each guy. Dable could be good. He could be a little too cute for my liking sometimes too, but it's he at least does shit. He at least knows what he is. He knows what their team is. He doesn't just go, oh man, this team's really bad against defending the run. Okay, we're going to line up in 22 personnel and pound away. He goes, no, we're 10 and 11. This is what we do. We'll find some runs that work, but we have this quarterback that's fuego right now, and we have some really good receivers. All right, let's just dial up, whatever it was against the Ravens, 25 passes in a row. I appreciate that. Like when guys can just do that and lean into it, he can get a little too cute, but like all these guys, like there's some really good play callers in the league. And I actually think the floor is rising a little bit as we kind of get younger and younger, with more guys are kind of out of that true West Coast thinking that I think a lot of coaches got stuck in for like 10, 15 years.
That's such a great point, right? Because Andy Reid was so successful in getting his coaches head coaching jobs that I felt like they all sort of like trust the process, when in reality, like none of them were like all of that like talent. Like Brad Childress wasn't that talented. Like, you know, I'm trying to think of even like Doug Peterson, I think as a play caller wasn't all that great. You know, and what you're saying now is like guys are getting it more, I think, because of their talent versus sort of the tree they come from. And instead of trusting the process, they've had to sort of, you know, go their own way.
All right. We've overcome, you probably can't tell because the editing's so good, but we've overcome myriad internet issues here. This is the Ultimate Athletes Adjust podcast. And we're going to seamlessly go right into what we were going to do to start this off, which is tiering the quarterbacks. Because look, we talked about schemes and all this stuff, but like, Nate, you're a quarterback. You were a quarterback. You know, if it wasn't for Russell Wilson at Wisconsin, I mean, you might be leading a Super Bowl contender right now. I don't, you know,
maybe Grey Cup backup might have been, you know, that
same difference.
More of my upside.
You might have been playing in the match right now with DeChambeau, you know.
Yeah, right.
Let's not forget about the XFL, George, a loyal client.
Yeah. I instead of scouting for the AAF, I might have been a part of it. Yeah, that might have been my calling.
So, we always enjoy talking, you know, not just quarterbacks, but people that like actually study them, because you always learn a lot about how they evaluate quarterbacks, like what they value, the things that oftentimes are buried in the numbers that we're looking at, but that helps us like tune those a little bit, you know, and like ultimately improve the way we think about things. So we are going to tier the quarterbacks. We're going to go through about 3 to 4 tiers. We probably won't get all the way to the worst ones because I don't need more people hating on Drew Lock. You know, that's
my whole shtick.
Yeah, right. Like we know tier 7 is Drew Lock, guys. I don't need to spend an extra 40 minutes getting there. But let's start with tier number 1. And what we'll do is we'll just go around the horn and say who's in our top tier, our tier 1 of quarterbacks. And I'll let you, Nathaniel, yes. Is your name actually Nathaniel or is it Nathan?
Is it just Nathan? And my parents didn't even name me after anything, so they just told people for years it was after Nathan's Hot Dogs. So it was a good weekend for the Nathans, you know. A very relevant name. My sister's named Adrian. She got named after my parents' first date, which was Rocky. And
I was gonna say it has to be Rocky, yeah.
Yeah, and I just get a made up like, oh yeah, Nate sounds good. no thought, nothing. Yeah. So yeah, it's Nathan. But anyways, I think that tier 1. And honestly, I'll just give you like a little spoiler. If I were doing this truly, like I think this guy is his own tier, and that's like an S tier, you know, and that's Patrick Mahomes. And I think that's just everybody's tier, all-time tiers. I think he's getting into right now, or already has entered that realm. But yeah, Patrick Mahomes is, it's one of those where, even with all the numbers, even with all the flash on the film, the throws he didn't get completed that are incredible and everything, it still undersells how amazing he is. It's just, I think I've never seen anything like it, where just every play, the read is almost every play, the read's perfect. The throws, he can make every type of throw possible. It's just, he's unbelievable. And it's one of those guys, I'm so excited. I hope he stays healthy for his whole career, because he's going to be so much fun to watch for years and years.
I was going to say, like, because I'll just go next. I also have a tier 1 of Mahomes and Mahomes only.
Yep.
And I was thinking about this, which was, and I would ask, you know, Eric is the historian here. If you took all the quarterbacks from history and you tiered them, you know, who, like Mahomes, I think is still tier 1. Who else is in, you know, like you start thinking about prime Brady, you start thinking about prime Manning, but Mahomes is such a different cat in the way that he does things. You know, it almost feels like he's certainly in that tier 1, but like, I don't know how many other guys are in that, like, you know, historically.
And
well, I mean, you have to put Marino in tier 1, right?
Yep.
Like when you look at his efficiency statistics, they were just completely like what Marino was doing in years 1 and 2, especially, but also the fact that like he went an entire season being sacked 6 times once. He went 19 consecutive games up being sacked. Like he was really good. And I feel like if the league was as quarterback heavy as it is now, Marino would have won a Super Bowl. Like back then, you needed to be more widely distributed to be a Super Bowl team. And I think that dings Marino in the minds of many. But you look back and you're like, this is absurd. His statistics for the time period. I think he is clearly tier one. I think obviously Montana, Brady, Eli, or not Eli, Peyton, Eli. You can't spell elite without Eli. And then, those kind of players. I don't know enough about like 60s and 70s to like put a guy like Unitas or somebody in there, but to me, I think Marino, Montana, maybe not. I don't think Elway was tier one, but other guys.
What about Young, Prime Young?
Yeah, Steve Young. Sorry,
yeah, Steve Young.
Steve Young has a case to be made to make
Favre.
that he's the best 49ers quarterback of all time. Like,
Agree.
But if you don't have the Super Bowls make it tough.
I have a new appreciation for, like, last summer when I was just bored watching old TV copies of games on YouTube, like 80s and 90s. That's what I did for like 3 weeks on end. I just watched old games. It was fun. But I have a new appreciation for Steve Young, knowing kind of what I know now about quarterback play and what I appreciate and everything. Oh my God, he's incredible. It could have been that top 3-ish, but I absolutely agree with Eric where I say like hit those. Maybe that 4-year, 5-year stretch, that's like the top as quarterback play can get. I mean, just big, athletic, can make all the throws, and just a true quarterback. Like he looked like a guy from now playing in the 90s, like at the quarterback position, like not just a true athlete, like just could be a quarterback and then, run like a 4.6 past everybody. Like, I mean, it looked comical at times, but yeah, I'm sorry. Marino is a great call. That was another guy I watched some of those old games, and it's like, oh my God, like some of the throws he was making were, I mean, I can't believe we don't see him every year, like, on like our highlight reel packages or anything like that. Like, and these are ones that are just random ones like that you just made in a regular season game, week 15. And it's like, that's kind of where Mahomes is, where he just makes these throws. We're going to forget about him in 2 weeks. But like, usually if it was somebody else, we'd be like, man, that's an incredible throw. That's like one of the greatest throws I've ever seen in my life. But he just does it every 2 or 3 weeks.
You bring up such a great point about if their numbers were in today's game, they would fit in. 70% completion with Young, 35. Like that's like, I think the difference. So I'll put Rodgers in the list too.
Yep.
I think Favre might be a step below because, I don't think he's as big of a bum as a lot of people look back and be like, oh, he threw so many interceptions and yada, yada, yada. But like, I do think he was like in today's game, his interceptions would be unacceptable, which is sort of weird to say. Back then it was worthy of the MVP because he is putting up numbers that were terrific. I just don't know. I think I would put him in tier 2 all time, Favre, but I would put Rodgers in tier 1 for what it's worth.
Gotcha. Eric, your tier 1, I assume
it's just Pat.
Is Pat.
Okay. We're on the same wavelength. That's awesome. I did that. And I was just like, I hope I'm not trying to be like, ooh, crazy, but I was like, he is in his own tier. He's S tier. Like that's tier 1.
I did that last Wednesday. We had Nora Princiati on, and I thought I had this great question about if you had to pick the AFC East coaches in the order you'd take them for your own team, like how would you take them? And I was like, I'm going to pick Sean McDermott, and I'm going to be the only one. It's going to be sick. And they both picked Sean McDermott.
Do it all the time,
Great.
Robert.
But at least we're moving into the areas where we'll have more differentiation, and that's great, which is tier numero dos. Nate.
Okay. I'll just get it out of the way and get kind of, I think would be my kind of takey pick, and that's Dak Prescott. I think I'm a huge Dak supporter. I watching him as a guy, maybe his first couple of years, I was with everybody else saying, oh, he has a great team around him. He's more good than anything. He's just a good quarterback with a great situation around him. And as he's evolved throughout his career, man, he's got everything. We had a podcast where we did the top QB draft, and he was my first pick, the number 2 overall pick. Wow. I think, yeah. And that was some with contract stuff in there too, but still, I still stick with that. I think he is an elite quarterback. I really do. Just being able to do all 3 types of throws, short, intermediate, long, drop back, play action game, athletic enough to be on the run. He's not going to juke anybody, but he's athletic and he can run guys over. Like he can legit run the whole QB run scheme. Also just the head he has, the brain he has. He's one of the best in the league, period. I mean, period at operating pre-snap and pointing out pressures. And at first I gave a lot of credit to Travis Frederick for that, because one, I'm biased towards Travis, and two, I just know, as he's a Wisconsin Badger, and two, I just know he's very cerebral, one of the smartest guys I've ever been around. But even he hinted to me, like, he's like, no, Dak's really good, man. He's like, Dak fixes stuff for me. And I was like, oh crap, that's saying something for a center to say that too about a quarterback. But Dak is just one of those guys. I think this year he's going to be a big, I hope he takes a step forward from this injury, because I think he's going to ascend, especially with the fantastic pieces he has around him.
So I'm shocked by that. And I think we're high on Dak. You know, we had Ben Solak on here a month or so ago, and he talked a ton about, you know, Dak's mind. And I thought it was really fascinating. Like, you look at his play against the blitz, it has only improved, and it's been remarkably elite. He does not take sacks, which is something that often gets washed away. We look at pass rating, like, oh, great pass rating against the blitz. Like, yeah, but he's getting sacked 15% of the time. Like, you know, that's not great. You know, so that's a cool one. Who else? So is he alone in tier 2 for you?
Oh no, tier 2. I would also have Russell Wilson in there. And then I don't know how we consider him, but Deshaun Watson.
Sure.
My tier 2 is actually a little bigger than I thought it would be. And then I go Josh Allen, Aaron Rodgers, and Tom Brady. But I put Aaron Rodgers and Tom Brady italicized, because it was just kind of one of those where it's like, you don't know, like, you never know when those quarterbacks, the rug gets pulled underneath them, you know, like, you never know when that it all just falls apart for him. I don't think they will. I think Tom's got another year ahead of him. Brady's got another year ahead of him. And then I think Rodgers was just more situational stuff, and same with Deshaun. But no, that would be my tier 2. It's a little bigger than I thought going in, but it was, you know, there's a lot of good quarterbacks right now.
George, I'm going to interrupt. I think that's my exact tier 2 that we were talking about the other day. I think I have it differently ordered. I have Brady, Wilson, Rodgers, Allen, Prescott. So I would have Dak at the very end of that group. But I do think this is where, in my opinion, the question of should you pay a quarterback the top dollar, and can you win a Super Bowl with quarterbacks making 40 million plus? I think this is where the answer, the answer is no. Like, I think Prescott's the last quarterback that right now, Prescott and Allen would be the last 2 quarterbacks that I'm comfortable giving the max deal to.
Which is a great way to look at it, because similar terms, that my way of looking at it was like, these are that guys are situation proof, like scheme proof. It's like, kind of like, no matter what team you drop them on, they're going to be an upgrade of probably who you have. Like, they are going to be that guy. True face of the franchise types is kind of like how I kind of looked at this tier, where it's like, whoever you put around them, they're going to make better. They don't need a perfect situation, or just even a decent situation around them.
So I'm the loser in this group. Then I have a different tier 2, and I thought of this a little differently, in that I wasn't worried about the contract I would give them ultimately. I was thinking, like, for this season, if I go into a game, how confident am I in this quarterback being the best quarterback in the game? You know, and so, like, with Mahomes, he's always the guy, right? And then the next level of confidence, I have to give a little love to, like, the old guys. So I went tier 2, just Brady and Rodgers, because I've seen them do it for so freaking long. They're mentally in a different level than I think what my tier 3 guys are, which I'm sure you guys can guess, you know, what they are. I'm not gonna prescribe demise because of their age. Like, I don't know why I would do that. Like, Brady looked better athletically and physically last year than he has like almost any year before. I mean, the zip on his passes was absolutely insane. Rodgers similarly was as good, as efficient as we've seen him in his career. And so if I'm going into a game and I have Brady or Rodgers, the only quarterback where I feel I have a disadvantage to is Mahomes. And I think they have an advantage over every other guy in the league. And I mean, you look at, they were the 2 highest graded quarterbacks last year. And that it wasn't like a Drew Brees, I'm going to dink and dunk it down the field. I mean, these guys you talked about, I thought you put it really well, Nate, which was you can hit the short, intermediate, and deep throws. Those guys still do that. And they also just own, you know, the mental component of the game. So that's my tier 2. I'll start off on tier 3 because that will catch me up to you guys. Deshaun Watson, I would put in this group. I don't, you know, want to spend time talking about him. I would go with tier 3 of Allen, Wilson, and Dak. And this is where I really struggled. And I'm curious, where you guys will have him. I wanted to put Lamar in this group because Lamar is so unique. He has a singular superpower that like Mahomes has a superpower. I think Brady and Rodgers have them. I don't know, like this group, they're all very good. I don't know that they have like one of those superpowers. Lamar does. I kept him out simply because of the consistency of throwing the football. And like to me, this group here, group tier 3, they're all really plus athletes, but they're all really plus throwers of the football. And they're right there on that cusp of like, I feel more confident in them than I do the old guard. And I mean, Nate, after hearing you say that about Prescott, after hearing, Solak say that about it, looking at the numbers, like I would consider going Allen, Prescott, Wilson, even though when I ranked them, I had Allen, Wilson, Prescott. But I think it's very, very close.
Here's what I'll say about the differences in tiers. Tier 1 is a quarterback who's going to have his team being the Super Bowl favorite no matter what, right? That's the case with Mahomes. Everybody in my tier 2 is good no matter what, but the orders change depending upon who the order of finish can change depending upon who's around them. I think in tier 3, the whether or not the guy can be a contender depends upon the ordering, right? And so for me, I have Ryan, Cousins, Jackson, Mayfield, Carr, Herbert, Stafford, Tannehill, Burrow. Like that's my group of guys where I think if the things turn out right, if all the coins flip over heads, Joe Burrow could have Cincinnati in a good position. Tannehill has had the Titans in a good position before. Kirk has been in the second round of the playoffs with the Vikings. Obviously, Jackson's been the MVP. Like those guys are guys where they'll never be like the guys in tier 2 will never be irrelevant, but whether or not they could win the Super Bowl depends upon surroundings. The guys in tier 3 could go from being extremely relevant to irrelevant depending upon outside circumstances.
Yeah. They're the quarterbacks that are 7. Well, now it's gonna be 7 and 10 and 11 and 6. It's like these quarterbacks. It's that little realm. For me, for tier 3, I started with Lamar, much like you guys have touched upon. But Lamar is, he's a superstar. I think the only comparison I have, and Eric, you might like this too, or depending on your feelings, when my dad first watched Lamar play, and I want to say it was against Clemson. We were about to play the Ravens. We were having dinner and we're watching the Saturday night game. We're just watching. And he just goes, "That's Randy playing quarterback." Like, and that's what he said. That's the only guy I've seen move like that. Like, it was just like, that guy's different. Like, and it's stuck with me to this day. That was my maybe 3rd or 4th exposure to Lamar. And then he went on to do things. That was early in the season. I think it was a September game. And I can't get that out of my head ever whenever I watch him. But that's the thing. Just like George brought up, though, there are some limitations with his passing game. He does. I actually do think he's more aware of things than he gets credit for, but I do think he even knows it. He goes, rather than me try and throw that ball in, I'm just going to scramble. Like, and I'm fine with it. It's just that he might not age well. He might, once he hits 30, 31, 32, injuries start adding up. Like, he might not age well, but for now, it's kind of a supernova of that one skill set. Above, I would say he's an above average thrower. I wouldn't say he's average or below average, but above average, slightly above, but then he is an otherworldly running a talent, as we all know. After him, I have Stafford, much like you guys. I think Stafford to me is the good quarterback tier. That I just kind of have a way of phrasing these things, but he's kind of like that cutoff for me of like anybody above him is like truly the guys that make everybody better. It doesn't matter the situation. Stafford, I think, needs some teammates and needs some help. So maybe that's where, and I think he really, for me, that's like the 10th quarterback. So it actually makes a lot of sense, like just even in that way. After that, I have Kyler. This is my little kind of mining pick. I'm a fan of Kyler. I like him more than I thought I would when he came into the league, but he does the quarterbacky things better than I like. Quarterbacky things as far as throwing the ball. Again, 3-level thrower, and he can throw some gorgeous deep ball. I just think he has been limited by some of the stuff that's happening in Arizona with some of the passing game stuff. I'm curious how it goes this year. And then after that, I have Justin Herbert. I'm on the hype train. I was trying to hedge against this, but I've been watching him a little bit, and it's like, holy crap, he does some good things. I am a little worried. I think you guys might bring this up too with him, is maybe some of the regression on some of the situational stuff. But he does the first and second down better than I thought he would when I was watching him, just as far as his eyes and standing in the pocket and delivering passes. And it was kind of like, oh, okay, you're a little more polished than I gave you credit for coming out of Oregon. Like he is such a different realm of player than he looked in college. And after that, Matt Ryan. And I think Matt, he's the end of my tier 3. And that's a cutoff for me of being like that good tier where he doesn't need a perfect situation around him, but he does need some help. Where he just can't create everything on his own. But once in a while, he can get you a bucket. If you have a good game plan, he's going to execute it perfectly. And he has a little more juice in his arm than I think I gave him credit for. But I watched a couple guys at the end of the year, Calvin Ridley, who I'll talk about in a little bit. But watching Calvin Ridley, maybe watch Matt a little bit more. And it was like, oh, okay, you still got it for maybe about 1 or 2 more years.
And that's why we like the Falcons, because they have Arthur Smith and they have a quarterback that I think can execute that.
And they got unlucky last year. I mean, like,
yes.
They could be a little better than
Nate. Are you one of us? Are you on the Falcons bandwagon?
I think they're a little better than people have been giving them credit for. Yeah. I think they battled a weird season, and I think they did some good things, and I think they just have a little more talent than people realize.
I'd just like to welcome you to the pain cave.
Yeah. The Randy Moss comparison is really good, because I'll say this about Moss. Moss was the best athlete I think I've ever seen play football
ever,
but the team's success depended on other things in many cases, right? And I think when it was the perfect storm in 98, they had everything. It was otherworldly, much like it was for the Ravens in 19. And much like, I think that's why Lamar's in tier 3 for a lot of us. It's because if everything comes together, I don't think there's a person who can press that edge better than Lamar Jackson or Moss back in the day, right? 2003 was another year where like everything came together and it's just like, this is stupid. But like some of the other seasons, it was kind of like frustrating, right? Because you're like, this guy has so much talent, but the offense is kind of middle of the pack. And I think that's what the frustration with Lamar is going to be, is that his impact on the game is more like that of another player, as opposed to a quarterback who sort of is 70% of the variance in an offense. Maybe Lamar's 60% of it. And that's where it's a little bit more like Moss, where
I like that phrasing.
It's going to depend upon other things.
I like that phrasing. And we've seen, though, and I hate to be like, oh, it happened in the playoffs, like where, kind of people will take that one game sample a little too far. I mean, there has been a couple of times where people game planned against them, and it's like you can see some of his negatives kind of crop up a little bit.
As with Moss, right?
As with Moss, exactly. Yeah. When a team can actually play it safe and stop the run with the front 4, it was like, oh shoot, what do we do now? Because you remember those teams, it was just it was bombs away or run the ball, pound. Yeah. It was great, but when it wasn't working, it wasn't fun.
Eric and I talked about Lamar a good bit. I have Lamar in my next tier, and he's the only one in my next tier.
Okay.
And here's the reason why. On any given play, all these next quarterbacks need help around them. But he's the only quarterback, in my opinion, on any given play where if everyone else shits themselves, he can still make it happen. Mm-hmm. And that's not the case with Ryan Tannehill. It's not the case with Baker. It's not even the case with Kyler, in my opinion. I don't think Kyler is anywhere near, like, he was great last year, but the year before it wasn't as good. And when he got injured, his scrambling was like otherworldly for 8 weeks, and then it like disappeared a little bit. I think Kyler's close. But Lamar he's the last guy in this group that I think truly has like a superpower. And so he's in a group by himself. And I just got to say this. I got to defend him a little bit. You talked about Greg Roman. I am not. Yeah, he did. It was great for a year. Okay, we've seen this before. Like, I've seen this story before. I'm from San Francisco. I've seen this. I've seen this play out. And I have not seen a worse group of receiving talent. I mean, like, the Patriots are like even might look like they have receiving talent compared to like what they had. So I want to give him a little bit of a pass there. Special thanks to Nate Tice for being so generous with his time. He also had like internet issues. He was here with us for like 2.5 hours. It was fantastic. So special thanks to him. Make sure you go check out all of his stuff. We'll be back with you on Sunday. Thanks for hanging out. We'll see you. Peace.